Hello students, we are about to dive into the portrait. This is one of my favorite assignments to do. I hope you will enjoy it as much as I do. By the end of this week, our goal is to arrive at this state of completion. I've shared a demonstration video that you're going to follow along with that will supplement what I'm going to show you today. And the goal again is to use that information to get to this state with your head by next week. So what the video that I'm going to share with you does not include, it does not show you how to build the torso and the shoulder portion here. So that's what I'm going to be showing you today. And then I'm going to carry on and show you how to add the rest of the parts. I have already laid out all the different parts, and you've got to pay diligent attention to the starting shapes sheet to make sure that you measure these appropriately. What they're going to give you is the basic proportions to develop a head that looks similar to this. Then from this basic head, we're going to be morphing it into our unique individualized portrait. So here I've started with the dimensions as followed. I've got a neck, a big tubular neck here that measures 2 inches across by 5 inches vertical. We want this neck to be at an angle. Our human neck angles forward. If we look at it sideways, the angle of the neck protrudes this way. It should not be straight up and down. That will not look realistic at all. So we've got our neck. This is going to be the spherical base from which we're going to build the head. And you'll notice, contrary to the video, that all of these forms are going to be solid. We'll be hollowing out at the end, but we're not going to be building on an armature. We're not going to be allowing hollow space in between like you'll see in the video. So this form, this big sphere, is going to be 3 inches in diameter. And that's going to attach directly on top of this form like so. And we'll smear that down and blend this up, being careful to avoid having an indent here. We don't want this to get any more narrow than down below. So as I smear that up, I want this to evenly run up. It shouldn't go in right here. And I'll work my way all the way around, blending that into the form. And see, I'm smearing from way down below to really incorporate that, give it a little smush together. Now in the video, the proportions that he'll be using are going to be for a slightly larger head. Because I wanted you to be able to do this effectively at home and not need to use an armature, we've decreased the size of our portrait that we're going to be using. So again, pay very close attention to the starting shape sheet and follow along with the video to see how to do it. And the shape sheets will give you the actual proportions that we need. So that's the beginnings of this. Now you'll notice that this is not very stable because we're lacking an armature. So that's where we need to actually build in a base similar to what you see here. To do that, I've created 2 spheres which will be used to create the deltoid muscle. The deltoid is the shoulder muscle. And these spheres you'll see are just over 2 inches in diameter. I'm going to take one on either side here. I'm going to smush that in like so. I'm going to take this other one and I'll smush this in on the other side. And I'll blend that into the neck, on the sides and on the back. You can lift this up, blend it underneath as well to really make sure it's nicely secured. Now from a side view, those shoulders are set slightly back. They're going to be the counterweight that's going to help stabilize and support the head and neck. So I really want to blend these up into the neck to make sure we want to create one uniform lump of clay out of this. Now you'll notice I'm working on a piece of parchment paper. I put this down so that my clay doesn't stick to this base. It also allows me to spin this more easily since we don't have that rotating armature that you'll see in the video. So again, at this stage, the back of the head should be protruding a bit, and we have this angle of the neck as it comes forward. The shoulders, we want to make sure that it's stable at this point. Nicely blended together. All right. From this, we can add this disc that they talk about adding to the back of the head. The disc, we're going to measure 3 inches across by 3/4 of an inch in thickness. That disc needs to go on the back of the head. And it's going to create the occipital plate that protrudes behind the skull here, the back side of the skull. And we're going to blend this in. Don't over mush or blend this piece. We want to keep that protruding nature. But what we don't want, the head is not spherical. So we're building off of that sphere, and we're going to create the elongated shape of the skull. This is going to protrude back this way and create that definition and shape that looks much more natural. Now the counter to that piece is this front forehead mass. So this measures 1 3/4 this way by 2 1/4 this way by 3/4 thickness that way. And this piece is going to go, if we were to divide this in half, right, to create a midline, going around the form like this. We're going to add this directly above that midline. Again, we don't want to mush it in too much. What we're going to do is blend along the side here, keeping this flat underneath and blending this along the top. That should define the forehead plane, this front forehead plane, and extend the shape of the skull Then we have the next piece is a smaller piece. This is going to be the mid-face piece. It's about 1 inch by, again, 2 1/2 inches this way and 3/4 of an inch that way. This is going to squish right underneath of there. And we're actually going to push it in a little deeper. This is where the eyes, this is actually the plane that the eyes are going to be placed on. We want to keep that flat from a front view. believe it or not. And keep thinking in terms of planes. So I blend that together, but maintain a distinctive sense of that front plane of the face. And again, it should be slightly indented from that forehead mask that we saw. I continue to smear to blend these together. That's going to give it structure and form as well. Just as I work on pressing these pieces together, it's important that we continue to check to make sure that that neck is not collapsing. So you'll see that it gradually, some of the weight can push that down. So as this piece gradually dries, it will support itself. Now a rather tricky piece is the mandible. The mandible is your jawbone, and this piece is going to measure 4.5 inches this way by 1 3/4 inches that away, about 2 inches that away, by 1 inch thickness this way. The tricky part is how you cut this piece. To cut this piece, we're going to measure, this is 4.5 across. We want to go to about 2 1/4 to figure out the midline. So I've measured 2 1/4 there. I'm going to cut this into a triangle along that line here, along this line like so. And then we're just going to take out a small little triangle like so. And this is the shape that we're going for. That piece is going to squish in right underneath of that mid-face piece that we added. We're going to push that back and in, blending it up. And defining the mandible. So this is going to be your mandible. And we want that to have a distinctive edge of the back of the jawline right here. So I'm blending that in, defining the back of the jaw right here. That should be approximately in the middle of the head. I blend that up into we want to make sure that it's protruding enough from the neck. Again, we might need to squeeze that neck a little bit. We blend that up into this. It's a good idea to check from a top view to make sure that these jaw lines, the back of the jaw, is even on either side. You don't want that jaw to protrude out too far from the rest of the face either. It should be in line with that. Now what we need to do is add the muscles that make up the neck which will help support this head, which continues to slump down on itself. First piece we're going to add is going to be a cylinder for the trachea, your windpipe. To make these cylinders, a trick that you can use is to cut a piece of clay in a cube-like form. And for a 3/4, this is going to measure 3/4 diameter. To make that, I'm going to measure a 1 inch by 1 inch square prism like so. And I've measured this a little less than, so this is 2.5, which when I round this out like this, will get narrower down to 3/4 inches, and in the process it will also stretch out so that I will have the correct cylinder length. So now you'll see I have some excess, and I can cut that to be 3 inches by 3/4. So the trachea is going to attach under here. What we're doing is avoiding having the neck look too much like a popsicle stick. If you know for a fact that you are going to be sculpting a female, you might want to reduce that dimension of the trachea to about 1/2 inch, as the female trachea is usually not as prominent as a male's trachea. Or if you're drawing, or if you're sculpting a child, you might also want to make that smaller. I can carefully blend this underneath. I do want to make sure that I haven't lost this space between the trachea and the jawbone. And that trachea should come down at an angle this way. It should not be straight up and down. It should be angled. I can use some of that excess clay to build up. So this clay is so soft that the weight of this mass of the head is squishing it down a bit. So I continue to squeeze to narrow it, make it a little taller. And hopefully when I add these neck muscles, it will help further support that. Now I've got 2 longer pieces. These are going to create the sternocleidomastoid. You'll see that these pieces are 4 inches by 3/4. And the sternocleidomastoid attaches right back here behind the jawbone. So you still want to have a sense of separation between the jawbone and where that attaches. So I'm going to attach this right back here, just behind. And it connects down to the center here of the clavicle. So it sweeps down. And again, if you know for a fact that you're sculpting a portrait of a female or a child, you might want to make these a little skinnier than 3/4, unless they're particularly beefy. So that is going to come down around the neck here. and attach down to the clavicle down below like so. And I'm going to attach a second one on the other side. Being careful not to obliterate the definition of the jaw, allowing that bone, allowing that muscle to attach up into the bone at the back of the head. Pressing it in, defining that structure. From a back view, we don't want these to be too wide unless your person is a power lifter. From a front view, we want to have a sense of a little bit of a dimple where the trachea connects down here and meets at the same juncture where the sternocleidoid mastoid muscles are going to come down. I'm going to smear that together like so. Now we have two more muscles that make up the neck. At the back of the neck we have the trapezius, and the trapezius comes down off of this back occipital plate area. And we don't want to completely obliterate our sternocleidoid mastoid in the process. We want to have a distinctive sense of that muscle forming down and into the shoulder, like so. We'll add one to the other side. These should curve down and out. And in the process, you can, if you're so inclined, create a little bit of the vertebrae, the spine that comes through there. Might even add a little bit more for the spine right here. Now, one last piece we're going to add to give support and to further define our portrait, to work as our base, is going to be the clavicle bone. For the clavicle, I've created one more coil that's 3/4 in diameter, and this coil is 6 inches long. I'm going to take this coil along the base in the front here. I'm going to press that in to extend my sternum giving a little more support so this doesn't fall forward. And it will define the clavicle bone. I can gently, supporting the back of the head, lift this up, round that out, and connect that into the rest of the form. make sure you're supporting the neck when you do this. I can put this back down on my and there you have it. This is our goal for the first week. Please let me know if you have questions, and happy sculpting.